Hey everybody, Ashley Francis here, the holistic psychotherapist, and today we're going to talk about people pleasing. And this is part one of a two-part series on people pleasing. We're going to talk about characteristics on how to tell if you're a people pleaser, as well as identifying where it all comes from. And then in part two, we'll talk about some of the things that you can do to stop being a people pleaser. So before we get into it, I just want to give you a brief disclaimer that people pleasing comes in all shapes and sizes. And by no means is this list exhaustive. It's very personal to how it presents for you. So these are just a few, just a snapshot of several ways that people pleasing is manifested. So keep in mind that it may be a little bit different for you. So first, let's talk about the concept of people pleasing. The best way to conceptualize this is on a spectrum. So on one side of the spectrum, you've got others-oriented type of people. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got self-oriented type of people. So the people pleasers tend to reside right around this area for the others-oriented type of people. So you're going to find people that are empathic, they're sensitive, they may be in the helping professions, just people that are more concerned with other people more so than themselves. And there is nothing wrong with this. This is just simply who they are, who I am. It's how we're created. That doesn't necessarily make us people pleasers. It's just kind of what's in our fabric. And this is where we tend to find some of the people pleasers. And a lot of that has to do with being others-oriented in excess, to the point of neglecting the self. So now let's talk about some of the characteristics. How does this show up? How can you tell if you're a people pleaser? So the first one is that you compare yourself to other people relentlessly. I mean, constantly. And let's be real. I mean, comparing ourselves to other people, it's just part of being human. And when we do that right, when we do it objectively, there's actually nothing wrong with it. It can actually be a really good way to gauge where we are in life. We want to see where we are compared to our peers. And if you're able to take that with a grain of salt and practice some compassion when you're feeling bad about yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. When you're a people pleaser, though, you're doing this in excess. You're constantly looking outside of yourself into other sources to determine how you think, feel, and act, and how it's really it's driving your life. So another disclaimer is that during the teenage years and even into your 20s, that's a stage of development where this tends to happen a whole lot more. And this is really tied to not having a really fully developed sense of identity. And this is normal. This is typical. So if you're in that age range, know that there's just a portion of that that's just going to be there. It's very human. And so long as you stay on a good, healthy self-exploration path, then you're going to come out of it. And most people come out of it naturally. But it helps to have some help along the way. So you're comparing yourselves to others all the time. The next is that decisions depend on what other people think. So again, it's not so uncommon to maybe check in with other people if you have a really hard decision and you just want other people's opinions to see what they think. Totally fine, totally healthy. But if you find yourself stagnant, like even paralyzed with most of the decisions in your life, you might be a people pleaser, because there again, it's just tied back to that weak sense of self. I don't know. I don't know how to make this decision because I'm so scared of making the wrong one. And worst of all, I'm really scared of disappointing or hurting other people. So getting to the point of understanding that you're going to hurt other people's feelings when you set good boundaries is part of the process. It's part of shedding the layers of being a people pleaser. So the next is that you change your mind after you get negative feedback. Of course, it's going to sting anytime we get any perceived level of negative feedback. Sometimes it wasn't even intended to be that way, but we made it that way. So yeah, we're not able to objectively take that in, and we take it really personally. So we start to catastrophize all of this, and we start to think, well, gosh, it must be a complete blunder. I must have completely failed. I need to go back to the drawing board. And now I'm going to completely change my mind just because of that piece of feedback. The next is that you tend to make your world smaller. Again, this is tied to the fact that you might be a really sensitive person, and it's just hard to be around people. Your perception is that everything is negative or everything is personal to you. So you may not have as many friends, you may not consult with your family as much. You really try to make your world a little bit smaller. And then finally, you constantly consume content. This is tied once again to that weaker sense of self. I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm watching Ashley's videos like crazy. I'm reading books. I'm always asking other spiritual leaders or gurus or going on quests and meditation retreats and all this kind of stuff because I just don't trust myself, because I just don't know myself. And that's what this is all tied to. Again, moderation, good, healthy, excess, not so much. Okay, so now let's talk about where this all comes from. Clearly put, it comes from never having received the recognition and approval that you so much needed in childhood. Now keep in mind, yes, this is tied to parents, but it's not just parents. It can be caregivers, it can be other authority figures like principals or coaches, other adults in your life, also the school system, which I'll talk about in a minute. So examples of this are that you received a lot of instructions, but not a lot of explanations. This is the way to do it. You don't question, you don't talk back. This is the way we do it. You just need to accept it. Another example is that the authority figure or the source was overly critical. What's wrong with you? You can't ever do anything right. So now you've internalized this message that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm bad. All the not enoughs. So that's what's been internalized. So you're constantly trying to compensate through the people pleasing to get this oh so needed recognition and approval. Usually it is the parents, it's not always, that you may never get. So what's tied to that is that you weren't encouraged to think for yourself. So this is kind of tied back to the school system in that we were kind of taught to be the same, that you need to think this way, you need to problem solve this way. And SATs are a good example of this, that if you don't, then you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. Something's really wrong with you. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of messages in our culture too, that really communicate to us that we're not enough. So we'll engage in some people pleasing just so that we can be enough. Okay, so that will do it for today on people pleasing. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know in the comments below. As always, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for part 2 on what you can do to be less of a people pleaser. Take care.